The Baltimore Ravens have officially backed out of the Maxx Crosby deal. They went ahead and signed Trey Hendrickson. Daniel Jones gets his contract extension with the Indianapolis Colts. Howie Roseman and the Eagles are making moves. Travis Kelce is going to stay a Chief, and so much more has happened since we last discussed free agency. The NFL, man, the offseason is absolutely cooking. Let's talk about it. So, of course, we have to start with the biggest news of, the last 24 hours or so in the NFL, and that is the Baltimore Ravens backing out of the Maxx Crosby deal. Of course, this deal was originally 2 first-round picks to be traded for the elite pass rusher from Las Vegas. Baltimore was going to send the 14th pick in this year's draft and their own 2027 to Vegas to bring in Maxx Crosby. And this kind of situation is starting to cast a spell on what is the Baltimore GM room? What is their front office? Are they a bunch of scumbags? Are they being, kind of nasty with the way they're moving out there? Or do they have some validity to what they're doing? Because we all knew that Maxx Crosby was coming off of a knee injury. The medicals, Baltimore had access to those, but Crosby comes in, does his physical, and according to the Ravens, he fails. But also, coincidentally, Baltimore then signs another pass rusher who his market wasn't quite what people thought it was going to be the next morning. So when it comes down to it, it's like, hey, are the Baltimore Ravens actually concerned about Maxx Crosby's medicals? And is this something that other teams would be concerned about? Or is this more like Baltimore being a little slimy and going, I know we agreed to this deal, but probably it's better for us if we just do Trey Hendrickson and keep our first round pick, which from that aspect, I do understand. And listen, if I'm a Ravens fan today, I'm sitting here saying to myself, Trey Hendrickson, and we get to keep our 2 first round picks and we get Trey Hendrickson for under $30 million a year. Yeah, that's probably the better deal. So it's not to say that Baltimore didn't do what was best for their team, or that Baltimore isn't making a smart choice by doing this. However, it's a smart choice in the short term. But where does this leave them in the long run? Will opposing GMs not want to negotiate trades with the Baltimore Ravens and this current general manager because they're negotiating in bad faith, they feel? Will agents not want to renegotiate contracts or re-up or stay with teams thinking you guys might try and slime ball my player? The reputation is very much so on the line for Baltimore here. And from all reporting, it doesn't look good. Some GMs are calling this a load of BS. And I think it's fair to say that, man. If you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you just went and spent $280 million in free agency because you had all the money to spend. You went out there and by every stretch of the imagination, you did overpay Linderbaum. And I get it. Rookie quarterback coming in, money to spend, $27 million a year for Linderbaum to ensure that you get him is fine if you're Vegas. It was an overpay that you were willing to make. You go out, sign Quay Walker, you go out, sign Nakobe Dean, you sign Kwity Paye, an edge rusher that maybe you didn't need to pay what you paid him, but because you believe in the upside, but also because you have a hole at the position now that you think Maxx Crosby's out the door. But Maxx Crosby's not out the door. And yeah, I mean, listen, if you're a Raiders fan and you're like, Baltimore, this is a scummy move, I completely get where you're coming from and agree there. I do, in some capacity, understand both sides to this deal, but ultimately, I do think that you have to operate in good faith in kind of anything you do, not just the NFL, but in anything. And Baltimore did not do that here. While it was the smart move for their future, in terms of the short term and building a Super Bowl contender for next year, I do think that this could come back to bite Baltimore in the ass one day. For Vegas, the reports right now on Maxx Crosby are just kind of, yeah, he's probably going to stay. He was at the Raiders practice facility at 6 a.m. this morning to continue rehab. According to his agent, he's on track. Teams are still calling the Raiders about Maxx Crosby, and I do think that these teams should be calling. I think that if you are the Eagles, the Bears, the Patriots, the Bills, the Lions, like any of these contending teams that were previously in on Maxx Crosby, should be picking up the phone and calling again. The Cowboys are out now because they traded for Rashawn Gary, which I thought was a solid deal for them. But, had they known this was going to happen, I bet that they would have waited. It's just the Ravens' move here to back out of the deal doesn't just negatively impact the Raiders. it negatively impacts everybody who thought, you know what, we're not going to get Maxx Crosby. Let's move on with our offseason because this trade has been completed. It's just a really, really wonky situation. And then you pair that with this morning, the news that comes out about the Baltimore Ravens officially signing Trey Hendrickson to a 4 years, $112 million deal. And before we talk about that deal, this deal happening so shortly after, and we saw some rumors of reporting last night, if you know Ricky the doggone X, he kind of said it was happening. And you just start to wonder, was this their plan all along? Did they catch word that Trey Hendrickson was going to be willing to go to the Ravens for a number that they were comfortable with? Is that the vibe that they got? And then did they have buyer's remorse and regret agreeing to principle on the Maxx Crosby deal and want to back out? That is the vibe that I'm getting. That is what it sounds like to me. And I think this is further evidence of that. People that want to give the Ravens the benefit of the doubt, I don't see it. When I see this move, I don't see giving them the benefit of the doubt. To me, they very, very clearly knew what they were doing. And the Trey Hendrickson deal is the nail in the coffin of proof for me. Now, from a football perspective, obviously, again, I just talked about this earlier, but 2 first-round picks in Trey Hendrickson or Maxx Crosby, give me the side with Trey Hendrickson in the picks. I do think football move-wise, that is the smart choice for Baltimore. Is Trey Hendrickson as good as Maxx Crosby? No. I do think Trey Hendrickson's an elite pass rusher, especially when he's healthy. He's had multiple 19-sack seasons. We'll see kind of where his health is. He is going into year 31, 32? He's going to be one of those 2 ages. Early 30s, a little bit older than Max. Not quite the run defender that Maxx Crosby is. But again, cheaper contract, and you don't have to give up the picks. Baltimore's biggest need was edge rusher last year. Obviously, you can't predict the Matabuke injury. I've heard some rumblings that his career is just kind of silently over. So again, if they can pair Matabuke with Hendrickson, fantastic. But I'm kind of operating on the fact that they're going to just have Hendrickson at this point in time. And this is a good move in a vacuum. Again, all the attention is going to go to what happened with the Crosby deal, but in a football perspective, kind of a similar way that I talked about the Maxx Crosby trade when it happened. Baltimore needed an edge rusher. It is the premier position on defense. They severely lacked in that spot. You've seen their defense struggle the last 2 years. Jesse Minter comes in. He wants an elite pass rusher. He's getting that one way or another. It was Maxx Crosby. Now it's Trey Hendrickson. But Baltimore still has an elite pass rusher. And I still view that this move pushed them into Super Bowl favorites contention. When you look at the roster on paper, it is still one of, if not the most impressive roster on paper with Trey Hendrickson. And now you are going to get to add a first-round talent at the 14th pick, whether that's the guard out of Penn State, whether you go and add more defense, whether you add an offensive skill piece, do you bring in a Mekhi Lemon, whatever you go and add at this point in time, offensive line, it's a first-round talent and a first half of the first-round talent plus Trey Hendrickson. The Baltimore Ravens are not done this offseason because now they have that pick, but they also just restructured some of Lamar Jackson's contract to free up a lot of cap space. Some of that, obviously, for this Trey Hendrickson deal. But it sounds to me, perhaps Baltimore is just not done. And perhaps the Ravens are going all in on the 2026 season. And while it was kind of a scummy process that they took, it could yield really strong results. Let's talk about Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones signed with the Indianapolis Colts a 2-year, $88 million extension, could be worth up to $100 million. The Indianapolis Colts and Daniel Jones wanted to come to terms on a deal. I think Daniel Jones probably wanted this deal, but over a longer length of time. The Colts probably would have been fine with a longer length of time, but less money. The two sides met in the middle here. $44 million a year, could be worth up to 50. A sweet payday for Daniel Jones. I think he has a massive thank you to say to Sam Darnold, because I think what Sam Darnold did after leaving Minnesota and then going to Seattle and winning a Super Bowl after the team that just kind of had a resurgent season from him didn't bet on him, gives the Colts a little bit of fear in letting Daniel Jones go. They don't want to be the next version of the Minnesota Vikings. And I don't blame them in that aspect. And I think that this is a fair deal. It's a lot of money annually for a guy who only had one good half of a season. If we're being completely honest, the Colts were good for the first half of the year. Daniel Jones slipped his play a little bit, got hurt, and then got really hurt. So they are betting on him getting back to the level that he was. The Colts are a real interesting team, man. They were close to getting Trey Hendrickson before the Ravens came in and sniped him. But you look at where the Colts allocated resources. Obviously, they traded those first round picks to get Sauce Gardner. They've made moves on that defense this offseason. And the offense, they trade away Michael Pittman, who over the last half decade has been the most consistent wide receiver on the team. They pay Alec Pierce $29 million per year, which, not to beat a dead horse, but is a move that I wasn't a fan of. And when I look at the Colts today, 44 plus 29, $73 million annually invested in the duo of Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce. In a league that's got about a $300 million cap, we could round up and call it a third. Maybe you want to call it a fourth, but a decent chunk of your cap space is invested in that duo. A duo that saw Daniel Jones be solid to good to great for half of a season, and Alec Pierce had 49 receptions last year. Alec Pierce is 25. Daniel Jones, before getting hurt, seemed to be really good in that system. But to me, that's a big bet on what if and a big bet on potential rather than a big bet on things that we have seen happen production-wise. To me, I don't believe that this is compiling to be a good offseason for the Indianapolis Colts. And if I got to plant my flag, I'm going to say that Daniel Jones, after this 2-year deal, doesn't get another contract of this stature with the Colts, and that the Alec Pierce deal is regretful in a couple of years, truthfully. And maybe I sound like a hater, but it's just where I'm at, man. Like Alec Pierce making more money annually than Nico Collins in division, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, DJ Moore. These are guys that I think are better than him. These are guys that have been more productive than him. Reports came out that Alec Pierce is going to get 8 to 10 targets a game. I hope so. You're paying him like a wide receiver one. We'll see if he has it in him. But this Indianapolis Colts situation, I think, is going to be a fun one to monitor throughout the next couple seasons. The Eagles made their first splash in free agency, signing cornerback Riq Woolen away from the Seattle Seahawks on a 1-year, $15 million deal. There was a lot of chatter about the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman on day one, as nothing was happening, but they were losing guys, right? They lost Jalen Phillips. They lost a Nakobe Dean. They lost a Jahan Dotson. They lost a Reed Blankenship. Like, pieces were leaving this team, and they weren't bringing back assets, and people sat there and asked, what is Howie Roseman doing? What are the Philadelphia Eagles doing? They have to be spending money. For starters, one, they don't really have a ton of money. When you draft as well as Howie Roseman has, and you have a Quinyon Mitchell, you have a Cooper DeJean, you have a Jalen Carter, guys that you got to pay. You've already paid all the guys on the offense. It's hard to spend a ton of money, but I do think that this Riq Woolen deal is a really smart deal for both sides. For the Philadelphia Eagles, I think it's pretty clear cut why this is a good deal. Riq Woolen was the number one outside corner for the Seattle Seahawks last year. They had a top 2 defense in football. They went on to win the Super Bowl. He was their man-to-man corner. One side it was him, the other side it was Josh Jobe. Witherspoon was super effective, but it was from the nickel position. Now Riq Woolen moves to being a cornerback 2 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Quinyon Mitchell opposite side him, and Cooper DeJean. They're, could be the stickiest secondary in football. That's what the streets are saying. They're calling it the stickiest secondary in the entire NFL. I'd absolutely believe it. And it's just a smart deal. It's a good value piece. It's not long-term commitment, but for a team that's looking to compete every year right now, some guys are going to have to come in 1-year deals and be productive. And that's what Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles are looking for here. Riq Woolen was one of the best corners in coverage last year, so I have no fear about his ability to succeed, especially in the role. For Riq Woolen, listen, my guess is on this standpoint is that the market wasn't what he thought it would be. There wasn't teams looking to pay him elite money. And instead of accepting a 3-year, $45 million deal somewhere where he's getting $15 million a year, or shoot, even 3 for $60 where he's getting 20, he wants to go prove it in Philly. Have a bomb fire year at the cornerback position and prove he belongs in that top of market category. And that's the player he views himself as. Is he going to do it? I don't know, but you're going to be on nationally televised games. Vic Fangio is going to put you in a position to succeed. And the guys around you in that secondary are good pieces. They're good players. The market wasn't there for you this year. A lot of the credit went to Mike McDonald and that Seahawks defensive scheme. He wants to prove he could do it elsewhere. And to me, it's a mutually beneficial deal if the market wasn't what Riq Woolen wanted it to be. I think he's absolutely going to ball out in that cornerback 2 role for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't think Howie Roseman's done. I think Howie Roseman's got some more moves to come. Some of the small deals that went down, or not small, but some other deals that I kind of just have more so quick thoughts on. J.K. Dobbins back to the Broncos, 2 years, $20 million. This makes a ton of sense to me. When him and RJ Harvey were healthy, it was a really strong running back duo. Dobbins, when healthy, has always been one of the more consistent backs in football in terms of actual production. It's just the best abilities, availability, and it's hit or miss. Travis Kelce back to the Chiefs, a 1 year, $15 million deal. Some people are saying too much money for Travis Kelce. Kind of sneaky productive last year for the Chiefs. Where I stand on this is at this point in Travis Kelce's career, he's made a ton of money. He's dating a billionaire. Maybe you just take the minimum to go back to Kansas City at that point and let them stack up on some more talent if the goal is to win. But it's also kind of like the NFL. It's not a job that you work at for 40 years. You get all the money that you can while you're in there and get out. So I get it. Double-edged sword. We didn't talk about this, but Devin Lloyd to the Panthers, 3 years, 45. They add Jalen Phillips, an edge rusher that they absolutely needed. They add Devin Lloyd now, a veteran linebacker that they absolutely needed. When you look at Carolina's defense with J.C. Horn, Mike Jackson, Derek Brown, Jalen Phillips, Devin Lloyd, it's starting to look like a defense that could be a real problem for some other teams in the NFC South, a division that Carolina already won last year, and they seem to be doing the most to get better in their division. Feels like it could be a back-to-back type deal. Romeo Doubs to the Patriots, 4 years for $68 million. Feels like a wide receiver 2 contract, but maybe a more consistent role. I saw that people saying he's going to take on the Stephon Diggs role. A younger guy, give him a longer term deal. I think the contract could potentially age well. If the Patriots add in a true wide receiver 1, whether that's via an AJ Brown trade or something else, maybe they bring in a Tyreek Hill and he gets back to the level he was once at, or something else I'm not thinking of, I'll like this deal a lot more. But if the Patriots went from Stephon Diggs as their wide receiver 1 to Romeo Doubs, it kind of feels like a net neutral move to me. Caden Ellis to the Saints, 3 years, $33 million. The Saints are a team that I think is going to be frisky in terms of competing for the NFC South next year. They lost Demario Davis to free agency. Caden Ellis comes over from division rival Atlanta, a good deal there. And then Leo Chanel to the Commanders, 3 years, $25 million. Pretty solid deal. They need help defensively. Chanel, a solid player. Not your strongest linebacker, but a pretty solid piece. Some notable free agents that are still remaining. Kyler Murray, hearing Vikings, maybe Steelers. Tyreek Hill. I still think the Chargers with Mike McDaniel might be something we see there. They have had a lot of money and they haven't spent a ton of it. Deebo Samuel, a lot of teams I think could be on him. Njoku, Goddard. Philly still needs a tight end. One of those guys will probably end up there. Wyatt Teller, would love to see him in Houston. Juwan Jennings, Stephon Diggs as well, some wide receivers on the market. Tackle Rasheed Walker, one of the better tackles on the market, still not signed. Bradley Chubb, Joey Bosa, some edge rushers, some veteran pieces there. And then at the safety position, man, Nick Cross, Kevin Byard, and Jaquan Brisker. So still some big-time free agents to be signed. Let me know your predictions for those in the comment section down below. If you love the NFL and you're not yet subscribed to this YouTube channel, make sure you hit that button. I will catch you next time. Peace.